Welcome to the Really Good Emails podcast. In this episode, we talk to Felix Zeltner about the Inbox Awesome event happening December 6th in New York City. Get tickets. So Felix, how did you get started in email? Are you an email guy or what?
I'm not an email guy.
Oh, okay.
Not at all, actually. I'm a journalist, which means you write emails. You maybe take a little bit more time to write emails because you want to do the writing. You want to write smart and sound smart. And English is not my first language, as you might have noticed. So writing emails for me was always like an adventure. You know, what kind of phrases to have to use to make people respond. But I'm not an email industry guy, and I got into it because a friend of mine came to me one day when I moved to New York 6 years ago, and he said something I'd never heard a German, which is my home country, say to me. He said, "Felix, I have an opportunity for you." And it's something you would never say in Germany. It's kind of like a weird, what does that even mean, right? So I said, "Oh, that sounds great. What opportunity is that?" And he said, "I have this little conference called Inbox Awesome. It's all about email and messaging and productivity and collaboration. And I don't have time for it anymore. Do you want to take over?" And I'm not a conference guy either, right? I'm just a journalist. So I was a little overwhelmed, and then I thought, well, let's just give it a shot. And I quickly discovered that hosting a conference, producing a conference, curating a conference is very much journalism at its core. You have to do research, you have to talk to people, interview them, find good stories, and then put them on stage while your audience is not reading this or watching it, and they're actually sitting there and they're reacting in real time to whatever you put in front of them. And the advertisers are also there. So it's kind of like this live journalism chemistry experiment, and it's a very immediate way of doing my craft. And that's how I got into email. And then I realized, different from Europe actually, that there is this massive industry in the United States that deals with this ancient technology that is email today. And because it's so patchy and because it's so old in like digital sense, there's zillions of companies and nobody is really knowing everything. Everybody is only just taking care of a part of this patchwork. And I found that really exciting. And then I got deeper and deeper into it. But that was how I started a couple of years back. And Inbox Awesome became a really interesting conference. The fact that New York is a hotbed for people that deal with communication, marketing, and media made this conference even better. And that's the way a non-email guy gets into this messy email world.
How did it go last year? Was it a success? Are you happy with how it went, or?
It was sold out for the first time. So we had around 300 plus people, and we hosted it at a fully running warehouse in Gowanus, Brooklyn. So imagine a space that is not made for events, not made for conferences, no windows, no daylight, just an old Brooklyn warehouse. And we transformed it for the day. And of course, 5 minutes into the conference, in the first panel, it does like a big boosh, and the lights go off. I almost had a heart attack. Yeah, that's conference life. There's always something. And then we figured out that it was just a little switchboard. But of course, you know, things like that only happen because we are adventurers and we go to different venues every year and we try stuff that people who usually do conferences don't. People love that, love going to different neighborhoods, love going not into your average Marriott ballroom with bad air and bad food, but actually explore and have some kind of adventure connected to the conference. However, this year we decided to not go to a warehouse, but do the opposite and go high above Manhattan.
Okay, you're going to say put it in a cave or something cool.
Yeah, exactly. Underwater would probably have been the next.
A prison.
Yeah, why not?
Alcatraz, awesome or something. But we went high above Manhattan this year, and we were on the 48th floor of a very new building in Hudson Yards. Some call Hudson Yards the Hong Kong of Manhattan. It's kind of this new city in the city that is being built. And so we have a totally different perspectives. Glass, 360 degrees view over Manhattan, very different to last year.
So in the first perspective, when people thought they may lose their kidney when the lights go out, this time they'll just be like, oh, cool, I can see all the lights in New York.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's always like when you're not responsible, you love moments like that where something goes wrong and you're like, oh my God, that's exciting. You know, what's going to happen next?
Yeah. So I kind of know, how did you start, Felix? And you took it over from somebody else, but what were some of your guiding decisions to do things in a certain way?
I approached this very much like I would approach publishing a magazine on the topic. So I tried to talk to as many experts as possible, and then ask, what are the trends that you're observing? What are the things that you want the discussion to be about? What are you working on yourself? who are the peers that you find interesting on the forefront of things. And that's how there's this kind of cloud in my head where then certain things start to evolve. That's what you then see on stage. That's the best way to describe it. So it's an organic process that doesn't happen because of me thinking that this should be on stage, but because of the community out there deciding or observing and being experts on the subject, being interested in stuff and working on stuff. That's also how I found you guys, because you do something that hasn't been there, which is just being obsessed with the way emails can look today and the way they can tell stories while you scroll down either on your desktop or on your phone, and just be compelled by design. And that's something I hadn't seen, and I was immediately intrigued when I discovered your newsletter, and I think it's such a great idea, because when I started curating these conferences, there was always a lot of talk about technology, and of course technology is messy and it's difficult, and there's always something changing, and there's companies being acquired and new startups coming up, but the design is something that's way more ancient and has this psychological side to it, and it's very difficult to design a beautiful image. I don't have to tell you this or your audience, but it's just so tricky. Therefore, I think what you guys do is great, and I was glad that you were interested in becoming part of what I'm trying to put on stage.
I've been on the speaking circuit for a really long time. I've been to all sorts of different conferences. I just got back from Copenhagen a couple weeks ago. Before that, I was in Australia speaking and been all around the US. And what's surprising to me and what I love about your conference is that it's a small, intimate group of people. You're not going out for 3,000, 5,000 attendees. I mean, maybe that's your plan in a few years. Tell me, why is that such a kind of a special experience compared to maybe a larger conference that you've been to?
I obviously admire and really respect the people who put on these large-scale events, right? Because it's a totally different animal. But we're not aiming for that because we don't enjoy that ourselves. I think that's the kind of short answer to your question. We want to put on an event that we would love to go to and we would love to bring our friends to. And that includes having panels that are not sales pitches where people actually try to discuss something and go deep into something. Having an audience that gives you the feeling that everybody here is kind of interesting and cool, and you entering the room and getting the feeling I'm not having FOMO all day because there are 10 stages and I have to scroll through my event app and always miss something that's happening while I sit somewhere and it's kind of mediocre and I'm like, damn, I should be at this other place, which is a feeling that all of us kind of privileged people that go to conferences know. But actually having a room of people that you come in and you have the feeling, okay, I can handle this, right? This is an amount of people, if I want to, I can talk to everybody here before the day is over.
Yeah.
And that's the approach that we went after, and that's how we keep it till this day. And from a almost scientific perspective, when you look at audience sizes, there's an audience of 6 where it's really intimate. Then you have a group of 15 people, which is the kind of round table discussion kind of size. And then you go 150 up to, I would say, 300, 350. That's the size of a big audience that you still can handle as one human. And that's what we kind of try to curate. We try to curate an event that has that kind of feeling to it, of connectedness, and not mass or fear of missing out. Fear of missing out is great from a brand perspective. Talk Louis Vuitton, talk Supreme, but it's not great when you are in a room with other people. That's what we believe.
So I've been to, I don't know if you're familiar with Internet Retailer. It's in Chicago every year. I've been going since 2009. Back then it was 5,000 people when I started, and that's a pretty big show, right? And now I think it's around 10,000. And I've spoken at it, I've attended it, and as a speaker, you get up there and you're like, oh man, this is a great crowd, because you can have 600 to 800 people in your audience and really portray a message. But then because they have such a big audience, they have these advertisers follow you up or speak before you and kind of kill the mood. And so I think with this intimate feel, same with when I went to Litmus Live back then, called the Email Design Conference. I think it only had 700 people that year. It was, I think, their second year or third year. They invited us to come out and speak. And again, it was really kind of that intimate feeling. Everyone knew each other. Everyone was in the same industry. We went out and hung out and got drinks and found ourselves in some weird place in Boston and had to get cabs back home, and nobody knew each other, but it was still this experience. Speaking around the world, it kind of gives you a different view of how different cultures do it. A joke in the States is not going to go as well as a joke in Denmark. I learned that one pretty harshly. So, but the Australians, they always get my jokes. So I got to work on my Danish jokes, I guess.
Can you share one of your jokes, please?
Yes, Mike, please.
It'd be out of context. You guys there wouldn't be enough background on it.
So Felix, this is the first year that Work Awesome and Inbox Awesome are the same event. Why did you choose to do that? And what kind of sessions can we expect this year? And what are you excited about in general with this one?
Thank you for asking. So yeah, our conference comes up with this weird double name this year. Work Awesome and Inbox Awesome. It's like two awesomes on one day. So why is that? It's a classic, I would say, brand shift, right? Where you have two brands and you want to combine them. And you don't want to, lose either audience. So what happened was, based on the success of Inbox Awesome, my co-founders and I sat together and we were like, hey, where is this going, right? What other event would we love to have happen that is missing? And we realized that Inbox Awesome is a subset of a much larger shift in our lives, which is work being transformed, right? From analog to digital, from centered to distributed, from office to remote, from human-made to automated. All these crazy shifts that are going on and are actually also impacting what's going on in America and other countries politically, because people feel left out, right? This is all a big conundrum. And we decided to create another event around that is basically taking on all these big trends that are happening in the future of work. And because of our brand, we called it Work Awesome. It was kind of like, that was an easy one, right? Kind of a no-brainer. Work Awesome then also became the name of the company that we started because we wanted to do more of this. And Work Awesome has since launched in New York. Last year we took it to Berlin. It went really well. It sold out immediately. And this year we're hosting it on 2 continents for the first time. Berlin is happening in November 29, and New York is happening on December 6. Inbox Awesome and Work Awesome are kind of like two of the same kind, right? So you have an audience that cares a lot about messaging and teamwork and productivity. And on the Work Awesome side, you have people that maybe take care of company culture, maybe have leadership roles in large organizations where they need to be responsible for these big shifts, or are startups that transform the HR space or others, but they all care about the same thing. So we decided to bring these two communities together this year, have this awkward double name conference, have 2 stages for the first time, and have both of the topics and the communities meet and mingle and kind of like, again, take this as a live experiment and see what happens. And so what you're going to see on the Inbox Awesome stage are, similar to the topics that we have always put on, like what is the next inbox, right? For us, it might be audio, which we're doing right now. More and more people get their news, get their inspiration, get their business advice through audio, through their headphones. Then what is the latest tools for productivity and teamwork? How can we get out of the inbox struggle that we're facing every day? What are the best and most beautiful emails in the world, which is your topic? And also, what is AI doing to the messaging and email world? Those are topics that are going to happen on the Inbox Awesome stage. And then we look over to the Work Awesome stage. On December 6th, you will see more like broader topics, like what is automation doing to the country? What is the future of the office going to look like? How is hiring changing? What does diversity and inclusion mean for, large organizations? Like those are all almost philosophical questions, while the inbox side is still very transactional. It's about tools and strategies and trying things out and communicating. I guess what I'm excited about is when people come together that usually don't meet. So last year at Inbox Awesome, we had a panel on political campaigning, and there were people from the DNC and the RNC together on stage. This year, we will have even a presidential candidate being on stage, which his entire platform runs on the future of work. Will be on the Work Awesome stage, but on the Inbox Awesome stage, we will have some of the biggest brands coming together and talking about how they're shifting from communicating one message out to the mass that they think there is, and then actually realizing there isn't one mass. There's many niches. All of us people are in different niches, and brands are already like only now figuring out what that means. So we'll have Vogue, New York Times, Sesame Street, like all these like big legacy brands talk about the mass of the niches, as we call it. How do you realize and analyze and find the niches that are interested in your brand in your product, and how do you then start communicating or create new communication channels, new inboxes for them? So those are just two examples for what I'm excited about happening on December 6th. And I'm super interested to see what happens when our two communities meet for the first time. The email person that is taking care of inboxes and collaboration meets the person that needs to digitize an entire organization or needs to revamp the HR department, which is head over heels because people don't want to apply for big corporate jobs anymore. They just start their own startup. So there's all these needs in the room, and we just think they all match pretty well.
I want to take this and run with it for a little bit because you have lots of different topics. Finding an individual to speak about this one thought that you're like, oh, this is a great idea. Who's going to be the person that can speak to this the best? You talked about doing a lot of research. I want to kind of get into your head and figure out, like, how do you find those speakers? And then how do you decide on who's going to speak on that topic?
This is really like core journalistic work for me. So as you said, I do a lot of research. I read a lot on all the topics that are on our stages. And once somebody pops up in an article or in a video or in a podcast that sounds interesting, I immediately try to reach out. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but oftentimes these people respond because they are interested as well, right, in getting the word out, just like you are. Then there's people who just published books, always a great resource because these people have huge expertise. They spent years researching on something, and they are finally out there in the world and say, hey, here's my thing. I can talk about it now. I have all the expertise that I can bring to you. And I have something to, also gain from being on a stage because I want to have people read my book. So authors that have just published are always a great resource for conferences because they're usually just such subject matter experts on something. And we have somebody who wrote a book, Alex Rosenblatt, who she traveled the entire country talking to Uber drivers and wrote a book about the gig economy. We have Priya Parker, who wrote a book about the art of gathering. She will actually be opening the conference with a special gathering experience where people are in a circle and get to connect other than listening to some stupid sponsor announcement from the stage. She will bring people together in the beginning of the day because she just wrote a book about it, right? So this is a great source as well. And then you have the influencers, right? So for example, for the Future of the Office panel, to give a concrete example, I met an architect here in New York who's building a lot of very modern office spaces and also designing them. And I brought him on and then kind of like dug into his network to see, okay, who else is there out there in the world who might be interested or interesting to have on stage together with him. And then he introduced me to one of the head design people at WeWork who's trying to come up with like lots and lots of different design concepts for, the entire globe of WeWork spaces to be, look to have a context in the neighborhood they're in, which most of them honestly don't at this point because WeWork grew so rapidly, so quickly. But he also introduced me to a guy who has a floating islands project. He's basically he's from the Pacific, grew up on Hawaii, and he is looking into the future of cities and workplaces after climate change, right? Kind of think water world, right? So, but this is not science fiction. This is happening in the next 10 or 20 years. So he is planning on these floating cities outside of large urban areas where people can live and of course also work, where startups have a place. And he will talk about how they take on the future of the office from a completely different perspective. And this is exactly how I would do it as a journalist. If I would write a magazine piece, I would go from the guy that is building the most ordinary offices in a city to the craziest person out there who is thinking like 10 or 20 years ahead. And when you bring that together on stage, then you have a great panel, hopefully. That's the kind of chemistry that we try to bring on. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah.
I love the diversity of ideas because I feel like some email conferences are only going to talk about email. But as email marketers, we're so dependent on these other stakeholders within a company. We're trying to use email to solve those same business problems that they're facing or convey a potentially complicated message through a restrictive platform. Yeah, so the mix of ideas at email conferences can only be beneficial. Having that opportunity to see some new perspectives and still talk to people in the email industry all at one event is really great.
So now we're going to flip the script a little bit, and we're going to talk about the admin side.
Yeah, how stressed are you? Are you dead yet, or are you still alive?
I would say less stressed than last year. It's like the stress level decreases because this is all DIY, right? We didn't have like we don't have a hidden agenda. We're not a consulting firm that started to, let's decide, hey, let's do a conference, or an existing brand that puts like 30 people onto their new event department and say, hey, let's create something. We just did everything from scratch, and it's all DIY. In the beginning, we like almost died every time we put an event, because we just did everything ourselves, and we made a lot of mistakes. And every year we're getting a little better, I guess, maybe like engaging other people to help us and have volunteers and just grow the team so that it's just less insane. But the stress level usually is at its highest, I would say, the 2 weeks leading up to the conference. So I have a good 2 weeks to go where I'm kind of like in a sane box, and then I'll go over to the insane. So it's a good time to talk right now, because I can still like form full sentences and don't just like shout or cry or whatever.
And so talk to us about getting sponsors. How easy is that? What do sponsors expect? How are you doing sponsorship differently? Because I know you talked about how you don't want to be just barked at from a stage with a sponsor. So I noticed that you guys have Adobe and a couple others. How is that process of onboarding those companies, and then what are you promising those sponsors, and how are they getting something different out of this event?
I learned a lot. And first, I had no idea why people wanted to sponsor. So the first conference I put on, was basically companies came to me and say, like, hey, can I sponsor? And I was like, why do you want to sponsor? Okay, yeah, let's do it. And then it was really that naive. And then I started to figure out, okay, there is a business case there. So when a company sponsors an event, there's a very solid business case behind it. They want to have some sort of ROI. They expect some sort of ROI out of this. They're not just there for fun. They put their logo on this thing because they want a result X, Y, Z. So when I started curating, I saw there are certain topics that are hot. People want to be part of a certain topic and are willing to put marketing money or sponsorship fees behind that because it's so important to them. They want to be recognized as the thought leader in that space. Once I learned that, I then tried to build business cases together with companies that I hope to have on board as a sponsor. It's very like around empathy. I would go to a certain company and say, hey, what do you need, right? What are you looking for this year? What is your goal? What are your fields that you want to explore? Or are there new offices in new cities that you're opening? Or what is happening, right? And then I try to feel out if there is a point that overlaps with what we do and see if they want to be a thought leader in that space, or if they want to connect with companies in that space that are part of our network. Or what also happens is they want to connect with certain attendees. For instance, a very classic conference business case is you have a corporate C-level person speaking on stage, and you have a consultancy firm seeing that and saying, I want to work for this company. Here I get access to the CEO. Here's my money. Give me that access, right? That would be the most banal business case for a sponsorship. And that is happening a lot of business conferences these days, where you see the Deloittes of this world or the McKinseys putting their logo on it. You can read pretty easily why they're there. And then there's a tech business case to make. So let's say you have a large software platform that you're building up and you want just people to use it or companies to use it. You want to get the word out. So I can't really answer your question in one way or the other, because everybody who sponsors a conference, every company who sponsors a conference has a different goal. And the goals change from year to year, which is why this is such a hard business for us on the organization side of things, because we have to feel out these goals and these targets every year from scratch, right? Because they change. I mean, business plans change, targets change. To get inside of people's minds at marketing or leadership departments and learn what they're looking for and then hopefully have that in store is a lot of work.
I don't know if you've heard, but we're doing a conference next year in April called Unspam.
You're not supposed to tell anyone, Mike.
Oh, well, we should, because we just like to put the down deposit on this venue, and it's a lot of money, so we should probably try to get people there. But what's some advice that you'd give to us just starting a new conference? Like, what mistake are we going to run into?
Well, one mistake I made in the earlier days was overstaffing panels. So I was so afraid to not have enough interesting speakers that I would invite too many people on stage, and then everybody has less time to talk and the overall message is kind of blurred. I still make that mistake from time to time. Sometimes it just happens, but I try to not focus too much on getting as many people on stage as possible because it just doesn't work as well with the audience. It's great for the people who are on stage still because they get the recognition and their name out, but the audience experience is different when you have a really deep dive with one person, with two, maybe with three. You can still handle that in 45 minutes. That is something I would definitely suggest you to be careful with. Also to have, if you think of it in a magazine kind of logic, you will also realize that when you flip through the pages of a magazine, you have very different formats. You have an interview, you have a photo story, you have a long essay. And I would strongly recommend to think about that in a conference sense. So to have different formats, to maybe have a little TED kind of talk and then go into a one-on-one interview and then have a really big panel that shows a lot of different perspectives. And then maybe have, something that involves the audience. And that would be my last advice, which is something we learned and we struggled with a long time, because as journalists, you always think you have to send, right? Send. You have to send as much interesting information and stories out there. But hey, what about the audience, right? So this year is going to be our most interactive conference that we've ever put on. We have never given people more time to connect than this year. As I said, it will start with an interactive experience. We'll have breakout sessions in the afternoon. We'll probably have even more interactive workshops on stage where people will be able to connect with their neighbor, connect with the speaker. We all do that because we have learned that not involving the audience is just a big mistake. A conference should be a conversation and not a one-way kind of like talking street. And I have to honestly say, as a journalist, this was a hard thing for me to learn, because journalists of my generation grew up with just broadcasting. Just put whatever you have out there and don't have a conversation. Having a conversation in journalism is a new concept, and it's probably the biggest shift in our own profession. And I'm just trying to do that as good as possible at our conference, and I would strongly advise you to try the same. It's just so much more value for everybody who is there.
Awesome advice.
I think we're almost ready to wrap this up, but one of my last questions would be, who is this event for and who is it not for?
There's a guy, his name is Greg Larkin. He used to be the chief innovation officer at Bloomberg. And he wrote a book called This Might Get Me Fired. The book is basically about the secret subset of punks that exist in every organization. The people that want to do things differently, the people that think about change differently, are more flexible, are more maybe crazy, and that are actually super relevant for the organization, but usually the CEO or the leader doesn't know about them and also doesn't know how to connect with them, how to find them. If you ask me, who do you want there? I want these people there. Those are the people that really matter because they are ahead of the curve. They want to change stuff. That is the people that are relevant to us because their mind is important inside the organization. But then we also want the leadership there to connect with them, right? So on stage, we try to have as many leaders as possible, not only because they bring relevance to the event and what they say matters, but also because we want the audience to connect with them and be on eye level. So that's kind of in broader terms. And when you ask about what industry is there, so our biggest industry in attendance is SaaS. So there's a lot of tech software companies. That's just the way we grew. I mean, the New York tech scene has grown crazy over the last couple of years. And we just see that in our attendance as well. There's just a lot of tech people coming. Then we have a lot of marketing folks. We try to limit, if you ask me who you don't want to have there, I wouldn't exclude anybody, but we try to limit the number of vendors just because we try to find vendors every year that sponsor our event, and we want to deliver them a lot of value. So we try to not be like a vendor-focused event where everybody's selling something, nobody's buying. E-commerce and retail also, and of course, because we're in New York City, media is always there, which is great. First of all, we try to have journalists as moderators because they're not afraid of asking tough questions and they're used to interview people. Also, media is just struggling with their business model or how their organization shifts and how they communicate, just like everybody else. So they're a very interesting industry to talk to and have involved there. And then we have the typical startup equation. We have smaller startups that come there, 10 to 50 people. And then we have VCs just looking for the latest trends. So that's always also a community that is attending. Then I would say the last category that is important to us are always really big corporations. For instance, we have Cisco on stage this year. We have JD.com, which is the largest Chinese retailer. These organizations matter to us because what they say matters, and the changes they're going through matter to all to everybody who's sitting there pretty much. We have a very diverse conference. We don't focus, because you said it already, Matt, we very much believe in this like cross-pollination of different perspectives. So we don't exclude everybody or say, hey, we only want the CTO conference, right? Where everybody has the same job. We just don't believe in that concept.
Awesome. Do you have anything else, Mike? Or
Just astounded by how eloquent you are in your saneness at the moment. So good job, Felix, and we're really excited to come speak.
so Felix, where can people get tickets right now? Where can they learn more?
Very happy to invite your listeners to attend on December 6th. The URL is workawesomelyc.com. And if you use RGE Awesome, so the letters RGE for really good emails and awesome, just in one word, at checkout, you'll get a very, very nice discount. That's my little gift to you.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come talk to us. We've learned a lot. We're going to steal your ideas for our event. We're excited to come there and talk about good-looking emails.
Thanks, Felix. Have a good one.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Again, see the link in the show notes. Use the code RGE Awesome for an astonishing amount of money off the ticket price. If you see us at the event, say hi. We'll give you a double high five and some stickers. Check out our Feedback Friday series. Much more consistent than this podcast. Check it out our YouTube channel every single week. New video up. Send us emails to look at. Have a great rest of your week. Bye!